repeat the discussion of previous class and then go ahead to talk about other things in the fiscal policy. So in our previous class, we said that fiscal policy is a government policy which has got two main tools. So we said that it's the government spending and taxation. So fiscal policy is implemented using these two tools. Like government can increase its spending on various projects, build motorways, highways, increase salaries of people, and government can also provide uh, defense, security. Government can also spend on security and various other things. Government can also, like, tax is a way of collecting revenue from the government side, and government spending is a tool for providing various necessities to the public. So these are the two main tools of the fiscal policy. So in our last class, we said that this is a first government policy, our first macroeconomic policy that we are interested to talk about. So whenever the government is running a balanced budget, like the government spending is equal to taxation, and economy is hit by a recession, right? So business basically fiscal policy is used to as a tool to stabilize the business cycle fluctuation. So recession is one of the phase of business cycle, and you know that in recession, uh, every economy or an economy that is hit by a recession starts producing lower than its potential GDP, and there's a rise in unemployment as well. So to control the to reduce the unemployment and to bring economy back to its potential, the government can use fiscal policy. And what specifically should be the policy? It should be expansionary fiscal policy, because economy has contracted, and like after contraction there's a need of expansion. So it should enact the expansionary fiscal policy. And what does that expansionary fiscal policy means? Expansionary fiscal policy means either to increase government spending or to reduce taxes, so as to increase the aggregate demand. You know that government spending is going to increase the aggregate demand, and tax cut is also going to increase the aggregate demand. Similarly, there's a third option that government can use both: increase spending and reduce taxes, right? So this is a one type, or this is a one kind of fiscal policy that is used by government when the economy is experiencing a recession. So to get economy out of recession, this government policy can be implemented. Another scenario is if the economy is experiencing an expansion or boom. And you know that in boom, there's a boom is always going to bring inflation. So so boom is going to bring inflation, and inflation is bad for the purchasing power of both consumers, producers, right? So whenever there's a boom, it would lead to inflation. And to control the inflation, now the government can use contractionary fiscal policy. Like boom is itself the peak of expansion. So whenever the economy is expanding, the government is using contractionary fiscal policy, which means government is trying to reduce the aggregate demand so that inflation can be kept under control. And what are the tools with which government can implement this policy? Government can cut spending, or government can raise taxes, or government can simultaneously cut taxes and cut government spending and increase taxes. So these all changes are going to reduce the aggregate demand in the economy. And once the aggregate demand has been reduced, the supply will automatically reduce, because sellers are always going to respond to the supply in the economy. So this is a way through which fiscal policy is one of the demand management policies. Like fiscal policy is a tool to manage aggregate demand in the economy. and you know that it is the specific situation which is going to create an environment of expansionary or contractionary fiscal policy. So once we are done with this, now we have some basic idea. We already have discussed about it. Now I'm taking a specific case. Suppose that like in the beginning of 2020, Pakistan was put into the grey list of countries that are very vulnerable towards economic crisis. So this led to uncertainty in the economy of Pakistan, and which caused investment to fall. Like Pakistan was uh, considered as the most vulnerable country towards economic shocks because of ballooning debt and terrorism. So, so some rating agencies that rate countries according to their economic performance ranked Pakistan among the uh, financially vulnerable countries. So this led to bad economic expectations, and bad economic expectations lead to a decline in investment in the country. And you know that when investment is going to decline, there's a decrease in aggregate demand. Now this scenario disturbs the this scenario created a recession in the economy, because aggregate when the aggregate demand drops, there's a drop in output supply as well. So economy was not operating at its potential, and the government was planning to bring back economy to its potential. So government decided that we need to enact, or we need to execute expansionary fiscal policy to bring back economy to its potential and reduce the unemployment that is caused by the recession. So let's now draw the diagram and explain how ADAS model can be used to describe again the business cycle fluctuations. So this is aggregate demand, and we have aggregate supply. Now both are at equilibrium at this point, right? So this is a price level, and this is, let's say, the Y bar, the potential GDP at 510 billion, let's say. Now, due to a recession, economy's aggregate demand has shifted backward. Economy's aggregate demand has shifted backward, and it is here now, 82. Now, the new equilibrium would not be here because there's an assumption over the prices in the short term, that in the short term prices cannot move downward. They are upward adjustable, right? So in this case, where the aggregate demand has decreased, prices will not move towards downward, because we are in short run, and prices in the short run are downward inflexible, which means they cannot move to downward. So this dotted line where it intersects the new aggregate demand curve will give us a new equilibrium point, where the output of the economy has declined from 510 to, let's say, it has declined to 490 billion, let's say, right? So there's a drop in output because of decrease in aggregate demand. So when aggregate demand decrease, supply also decrease. So now economy is in the recession, and there is a lot of unemployment as well. So there's a loss in output. Industries have started producing lower output. They have laid off the workers, and the unemployment has been increased. Now, as a policymaker, you are asked a question that how should we bring back the economy to its potential? So you would suggest the government that we can bring back the economy to a potential of 510 and reduce the unemployment by applying expansionary fiscal policy, right? And then the next question will be next question that is asked by next question that will be asked from you, that by how much we should increase the government spending so that aggregate demand goes back to its potential. So you would first calculate output gap. So you know that from our previous lecture, that output gap is the difference between current GDP and potential GDP. So it is equal to 490 minus 510. So it is minus 20. So output gap is 20 billion. So once you know output gap, Now you will be able to find out how much government should increase spending. Number one. Another thing that you need to know is the multiplier effect. Multiplier will tell you by how much output would rise if the initial spending increases by some units. So multiplier is equal to 1 over 1 minus MPC. So this is a value of multiplier, right? But if you would write it in a more standard form, it would tell you that if you want to change some output, you need to change initial spending. So 1 over 1 minus MPC is multiplier times change in, let's say, G. So this is a government expenditure multiplier. This is what? This is government expenditure multiplier, because let's suppose that if government spending increases by 1, right? The output would increases by 1 over 1 minus MPC times. So this multiplier will tell us that if initial spending increases by 1 unit, by how much units output is going to change. So now we need MPC, marginal propensity to consume, so that we can predict the multiplier. So we can calculate the multiplier. So MPC here, suppose, is given by 0.75, and you know that MPC is the rate at which people are going to increase their consumption with a 1 unit increase in income. So MPC here is 0.75, which means if income increases by 1 unit, there would be a 0.75 uh, uh, 0.75 units increase in the consumption, right? So based on this, we can calculate the multiplier, that 1 over 1 minus MPC, 1 minus 0.75, it would be equal to 1 over 0.25. And this, after point, there are two digits. So in numerator, it would be 100 and divided by 25. So it will give us the value of 4. So now we know the value of multiplier. Multiplier is equal to 4. Now we are asked the question by how much we should increase the government spending. You know that output gap is 20. Output gap is 20. So you should increase initial spending by 5 billion, and once the initial spending has been increased by 5 billion, the output would increase by 20 billion. So how would you prove it? You would say that the change in output would be equal to 20 billion when there's a when the initial spending, that is change in government spending, is of 5 billion and multiplier has already got value of 4. So 5 billion is the initial increase in government spending. When it is multiplied by 4, over the period of time, it will increase the output by 20 billion, which is equal to the value of output gap from where you started your discussion. So this is important. Now, this like initial increase in government spending is going to increase the aggregate demand by this initial spending. And once multiplier process has been complete, the aggregate demand would adjust back to its initial level, like the one it was earlier. So aggregate demand would adjust to it once the multiplier process is complete. So now let's show this in the above diagram, like we did in our previous class. Now, aggregate demand in response to initial increase in government spending would shift upward, like it would shift upward. So this is new aggregate demand. So this is AD3. This is aggregate demand 3, and this is as a result of G increase by uh, 5 billion. 5 billion, right? So when G increased by 5 billion, aggregate demand increased. So this is a new level of aggregate demand. And once the multiplier process has worked completely, aggregate demand would go back to its original value. Like here, it goes back to original value over once the multiplier process is complete. So this would be equal to a 20 billion increase in aggregate demand, which is caused after the change in multiplier process. Like 20 billion is a result, final result once the multiplier process has is complete. Like now you would show that over the time this aggregate demand would go back and economy will go back to its potential and unemployment will be controlled. So this is how expansionary fiscal policy can be enacted using the tool of government spending. Now, another tool that we know from our previous discussion is the taxes. So taxes can also be used to taxes can also be used to a tax cut can also be used to raise the aggregate demand. How do we know this? We know that a tax cut will increase the income by the amount of tax cut, and an increase in income will go into consumption, increase consumption, and remaining portion will be increase in saving. So we know this from our previous knowledge of goods market equilibrium, right? So goods market, uh, like the components of aggregate demand. So one thing you need to note here, that increase in saving is going to decrease aggregate demand. So we are in a recession where tax cut can increase aggregate demand only by increasing consumption. So given this fact, what we need to do, like we increase the government spending in our previous analysis by 5 billion, right? But now when we are using tax as a tool to bring economy back to its potential or out of recession, we tax cut should be larger than government spending. Tax cut should be larger than government spending. Like tax cut should be larger than government increase in government spending. And the rationale is here, the logic is here, that if you increase the government, let's say if you decrease the taxes by 6.67 billion, right? This is a decrease in tax, this is equal to tax. So this is a drop in tax by 6.6 billion. So this would increase the income by 6.67 billion, right? So this 6.67 billion will bring a change in consumption. Consumption would be affected, and the new consumption or the new consumption level will be decided by, like new consumption level will be MPC times change in MPC times income, which is, let's say, 6.67. So we know that MPC is 0.75 and 6.67, 75% of 6.7 is 5. So again, consumption would increase by 5 billion. So 75% of 6.67 is 5 billion, right? And we also need to calculate MPS here, like 0.25 is MPS. 0.25 is MPS. So MPS time in 6.67 will give us the change in saving. So 0.25 is MPC into 6.67. So 25% of 6.67 is 1.67. So this is a in total both makes 6.67. So what was our objective? We were decreasing taxes so that consumption would increase, and consumption would increase in a way that it would bring an increase in aggregate demand. And when aggregate demand increase, economy will revive its out, economy will get back to its potential GDP. So we decrease the taxes by amount larger than increase in government purchases. So we decreased taxes by 6.67, in response to which consumption changed by 5 billion. So a 5 billion change in consumption, 5 billion is equal to change in consumption. Okay, 5 billion is the initial change in consumption. So delta C is equal to 5 billion. And if you want to change the output by 20 billion, we need to change consumption by 5 billion. So we achieve the objective. So if consumption changes by 5 billion, it would multiply by 4, which is a multiplier value of multiplier, which we got using MPC. So this would change the output by 20 billion. So this output gap would again be covered by a decrease in tax cut. So a decrease in tax cut would raise the aggregate demand and bring back the economy out of the recession. So we can also show this on a diagram in a very short time. Like we can show this using the same diagram, aggregate demand and supply. So initially aggregate demand decreased to this value. So there's a equilibrium initially at this point T1, and Y1 bar was like Y bar was 5, 10, and now economy is at 490, which is in recession. So tax cut of 6.67 will raise the consumption. So this increase, this dotted red line is AD. This is the before recession. Like this is before recession, and this is the aggregate demand when economy is in recession. So we would label it as AD2, and this is aggregate demand when a tax cut of 6.67 billion is offered, but it increased, the consumption was increased by 5 billion, which led to an increase in aggregate demand by 5 billion, right? And 5 billion multiplied by 4 will end up increasing the aggregate demand up to 20 billion once the multiplier process is complete, right? So now you know this how it works. So this is the use of expansionary fiscal policy when the economy is experiencing a recession. Now, another thing you need to know here, which is very important, that a combination of increase in government purchases and a decrease in taxes can also produce the same outcome. So you would apply in the same diagram above that. Okay, so if government spending is being increased by 1.25 billion and tax cut of 5 billion is offered, then combination of two will produce the same effect on aggregate demand. Like aggregate demand will go back to its potential when the economy has fallen into a recession and unemployment has been increased. So this is a way with which uh, expansionary fiscal policy is being executed. Now let's talk about second case, the second scenario, where the economy is experiencing a boom, and this boom in the economy is causing inflation. And what are the events that may cause this boom? Suppose that Chinese investors are highly motivated to invest in Pakistan, right? So because of their optimism in Pakistan, most of the Chinese people are investing in Pakistan. This leads to an increase in investment in Pakistan, and when investment is increasing, it will ultimately increase aggregate demand, and when aggregate demand increases, there would be an increase in price level in the country. So, to control this increase in price level that is caused by an increase in aggregate demand, you need to apply some policy. So you would be asked that, as a policy maker, when the economy is experiencing a boom or expansion, which has led to an increase in aggregate demand and price level, what should be your stance to control the price level? So you would say that uh, we can apply contractionary fiscal policy to control the inflation and stabilize the output. So you would say that contractionary fiscal policy will be useful in this scenario. So how to show it up? We would show it this way. We would say that, suppose that this is again equilibrium. Initial equilibrium at Y bar 510, and now there's a sudden increase in aggregate demand, which is causing aggregate demand to rise up to this value, let's say, for example. So this is a new AD curve, aggregate demand curve. Now, as a result of which, there's an increase in price level. There's an increase in price level. So price level rises from P1 to a new level P2. This is P1, let's say. And now the prices have increased and economy is operating above its potential. The potential GDP is 510. Now economy starts producing 522 units of output in billion units, right? So there's an economic expansion that is caused by an increase in aggregate demand. Now, as a policymaker, you are asked to control this inflation and bring back the economy to its potential. Now, this is called, this gap between 522 and 510 is called inflationary gap, because there was a sudden increase, there was a sudden demand shock that led to uh, an increase in output from potential value and ultimately brought inflation into the economy. Now, the job of a policymaker is to control inflation and bring back economy to its potential. So how he will decide? He will again look into output gap and MPC. And we know that MPC and output gap in our discussion are constant for now. Okay. So inflationary output gap would be inflationary inflationary output gap would be equal to 522 minus 510, which means y minus y bar. So this would be equal to 12 billion, right? So 12 billion is output, inflationary output gap, and economy is in a boom. So you will be using contractionary fiscal policy. So the first tool you are available with is decrease government spending. So the next question comes, by how much? So you would decide by looking at the output gap, that is 12 billion, and you would see, you would need to keep one thing in mind, that as a result of increase in aggregate demand, prices went up. And in our previous case, because of decrease in demand, prices did not uh, go down, which means that prices are having ratchet effect. Ratchet effect means prices can adjust upward to any value, but they cannot go downward. They cannot go downward, because if they would go downward, economy can be brought into a uh, like a severe recession, right? So there's a ratchet effect which is causing prices to adjust upward, but prices cannot adjust downward. So now we need to decide by how much we should decrease the government spending. So we would say that if the multiplier is MPC is 0.75, so the multiplier has got value of 4. So if the output is to be decreased by 12 billion, so it means that government should decrease its spending by 3 billion, and when multiplied by 4, it would lead to a change in output of 12 billion, right? So now you are clear about the stance and you now know the value of decrease in government spending. Now you should ask the question, once you have gone through the video, like why the government spending cannot be reduced more than 12 billion. What will happen in response to a decrease in government spending? If government spending is decreased by, let's say, 4 billion, so 4 multiplied by 4 will decrease the output by 16 billion, but our output gap was only 12 billion. If the output has to be brought down by 16 billion, economy will go from a boom to a recession. So this would be bad for the economy. So it is very since it requires very careful analysis for deciding how much the government spending has to be reduced, and it should be in line with the output gap, right? So what we will say, we will show here in this diagram that, okay, Now economy is experiencing a boom and government is deciding to cut the spending as a tool of contractionary fiscal policy. So there's a drop in, let's say, I need to redraw it. Okay, I need to redraw this by, let's say, this is the initial drop in government spending by, let's say, 3 billion. So this is reducing the aggregate demand by, so the initial, this is called, this is the new AD, this is called new AD, maybe AD3. So this is representing that there's a drop in spending by 3 billion, which will ultimately create a drop in spending by uh, let's say, so this is a price level that we need to follow, the price level that we need to keep in mind. So prices in the short run are going to stay rigid. So this would be overall adjustment of aggregate demand once the multiplier process is complete. So this is the after adjustment aggregate demand, which you can call aggregate demand 5, which you can call AD5. Now, at this point, economy is again at its equilibrium, but the price level is controlled now. Like prices are not let to rise further because it would lead to a kind of inflation in the economy. So, to control the inflation, once the multiplier process is complete, so there would be a complete backward movement of aggregate demand towards its potential, so that economy can be brought back to this 510 billions of output, and can be prices can be stabilized at P2 level. So once I know this, right, so I can also use the tax cut as well. So tax increase, because I have to contract the aggregate demand so that inflation can be under control. So what I will do, another tool that I can apply to contract the aggregate demand will be tax increase. So increase in tax would reduce the income, and reduction income will be reflected with a fall in consumption and a proportion of fall in savings as well. Because income is falling, both uh, consumption and saving would fall by some fraction. So we would say that suppose suppose taxes are being reduced by uh, 4 billion. And why I'm reducing taxes by 4 billion? Because a portion of like there's a 4 billion decrease in taxes, it will increase income by 4 billion. So this 4 billion income will bring an increase in a decrease in consumption. So consumption, change in consumption would be equal to 0.75 MPC times the change in income. So this would be 3, and change in saving would be 0.25, which is MPS, times 4. So 25% of 4 is 1, right? So again, because of decrease in taxes, there is an increase in income, and when income is increased, there's an increase in consumption of 4 billion. And when this 4 billion is multiplied by the, sorry, there's a there's a 3 billion increase in income, because we have 75% increase. We have decreased the taxes by 70.4 billion, and the consumption in response to it decreases by 3 billion. So 4 times 3 will decrease the output by 12 billion, which is a value of output gap. So we can also show this using the above diagram as well. I hope now you can show it, that you would write that, okay, now this is not G, this is an increase in T by 4 billion, and 4 billion decrease in 4 billion increase in taxes is going to decrease the consumption by 3 billion. And when 3 billion is 3 billion would be initial, this dotted line will be representing 3 billion increase in taxes, because of which aggregate demand has shifted backward. And once the multiplier process is complete, the red aggregate demand, which is AD5, would appear, and economy will get back to its equilibrium at Y bar, and price level is stabilized at P2. So this is a way with which economy is uh, inflation is controlled by using the fiscal policy. Now we can also apply the combination of increase in G and decrease in T to achieve the same outcome. Decrease in G would cut the aggregate demand, and increase in T would also cut the aggregate demand, but the proportion has to be decided looking at the output gap. So this is all about what is fiscal policy, how it is used as a tool to bring uh, output stability, control unemployment, achieve price stability in the economy. So this is how governments in various countries use fiscal policy to minimize the gap between actual GDP and potential GDP. Our government use fiscal policies to stabilize the business cycles that are business cycle fluctuations that are taking place in the economy. The usage and the implementation of fiscal policy, a government policy. Now we'll understand that now this is a representation of recession case, right? You saw that aggregate demand went to a drop in aggregate demand because of investment brought the economy into a recession, and economy is experiencing a higher unemployment and a fall in output. So as a policymaker, you were asked to suggest a policy. So you suggested expansionary fiscal policy, and using expansionary fiscal policy, there was you suggested the government to increase the spending by initial amount of uh, like 5 billion, and multiplier was 4. So economy in the long run went back to its potential. So fiscal policy is always required in the short run. So contractionary fiscal policy will also appear. You can see that there's an initial equilibrium and there is a sudden demand shock that is causing demand to rise from point A to B, and leading to a larger output of 522 billion, and a price level of P2 level. So there's an inflation in the economy. So to control the inflation, you need to contract the aggregate demand, which means to reduce the aggregate demand. So you implemented the contractionary fiscal policy by cutting the spending or by increasing taxes to bring back economy to point C. So at point C, economy is again operating at its potential in the short run. Uh, P2 is a level of output. So this is the adjustment of aggregate demand once the multiplier process is complete. Now there's a discussion on non-discretionary fiscal policy, the built-in stability. Now, non-discretionary fiscal policy is when the government is not intervening by intervening to bring economy out of recession or to control inflation. Rather, economy is left on the mercy of tax system. So, built-in stability arises because taxes are going to change when GDP in the country is going to change. How do we know this? We know from our discussion of macroeconomics about GDP that GDP is income, expenditure, and production. So when GDP is rising, firms are going to produce more, people are going to earn more, and when firms and people are going to earn more, both firms and people are going to spend their money, and when money is spent, government is going to collect more taxes. So it means that when economy is going through good times, GDP is expanding, there would be automatic increase in the tax revenue, right? So in good economic times, automatically taxes are going to rise. And when there's a bad economic time, when GDP is falling, firms are producing less, people are getting less incomes, they are going to spend less. So government is automatically going to get lesser revenue. So this is called built-in stability that is dependent on the tax system in the country. So what 2 points here are key to remember: that taxes automatically rise with GDP because when the incomes are going to rise, tax revenues are going to rise, and tax revenue is going to fall when GDP is going to fall. So it means that tax revenue is proportional to GDP. Tax revenue is proportional to GDP. And you know that transfer payments like unemployment allowances and subsidies are going to rise when GDP is falling, because there's a need of providing public some relief in the form of transfers and subsidies when everyone in the country is having lower income. When these go like so this is the idea of built-in stability, that the tax system is the tax revenue is proportional the to the GDP. So let me illustrate this with the help of diagram. So built-in stability is represented here in the diagram. On the vertical axis, we have government expenditure, G, and tax revenue. And on the horizontal axis, we have GDP. Now suppose that equilibrium GDP or full employment GDP is GDP2 in the diagram. And government spending is horizontal, which means that government spending is not dependent on the level of GDP. Whereas tax curve is positive slope, which means that with the increase in GDP, tax revenue is going to rise. This is automatic, like there's no direct government intervention. Government is not doing it itself. It is the tax system that is so responsive to the changes in GDP. I'll explain it later. Now, once you know the meanings of slope, now let's analyze it further. Suppose that full employment GDP is GDP2. Now, if the economy is hit by a recession and there's a drop in GDP from GDP2 to GDP1, so there's an automatic decrease in taxes. So you can see the tax has decreased and there's an automatic increase in government spending. So it means that government is running a budget deficit. Government runs a budget deficit when the economy is hit by a recession, right? So this is automatic stability. Like government is not using any kind of fiscal policy directly. Like government is not intervening into the country by increasing spending or decreasing taxes. This is automatic adjustment. So when the GDP is falling, there's automatic decline in tax revenue because businesses are going to produce less, people are going to buy less, and spending in the country is going to drop. So because of drop in the spending, there's a decrease in tax revenue and there's an increase in government spending. So in the recession, governments oftenly observed to be running a deficit. Whereas if the economy is experiencing an expansion, like here GDP3, so there's a new level of GDP higher than GDP2. So when economy is expanding, there's an automatic increase in tax revenue because businesses are producing more, people are earning more, they are spending more. So when the economy is going to experience inflation, when once the economy has expanded, it would uh, it would be automatically stabilized by increase in tax. So it means that auto built-in stability automatically guarantees the contractionary fiscal policy in good economic times. So there's an increase in tax revenue up to this point, right? And there's a in good economic time, spending is lower than tax revenue, so government is running a budget surplus. So this is built-in stability that is dependent on tax system in the country, and tax system defines the slope of this line, the tax line. If tax system is uh, tax system is like this tax system is progressive, like people with larger income will pay larger tax rate and people with smaller income will pay smaller tax. This is called progressive tax system. If the tax system is regressive, people with larger income will pay the same tax and people with a smaller income will also pay the same tax. So in that country, built-in stability won't work. This built-in stability is not going to work. So when built-in stability is not working, the countries need to like implement the discretionary fiscal policy. But here we are talking about non-discretionary fiscal policy. Now I hope you have got the point why I have brought this into my discussion. Like it is the tax system that is going to help the economies in achieving automatic stability. So better that if tax system is progressive, it is highly likely that economy will adjust itself without uh, the active fiscal policy. So size of stability depends on how responsive taxes are to changes in GDP. The more progressive the tax system, the greater the economy's stability. So this is what is being represented by uh, the line that we saw with T. Now, after understanding built-in stability, I'm going to talk about the tools of uh, some issues with fiscal policy. There are various things, but because of shortage of time, I need to skip few things. So this is important. Okay. So there are some certain problems, criticisms, and complications in fiscal policy. And the first problem is problems of timing. Like what kind of problems are related to timing in fiscal policy? Recognition lag. Recognition lag means recognizing when the economy is in recession or when the economy is experiencing inflation. Because over the business cycle, our economy does not move smoothly over the business cycle. So it is difficult to predict when the economy is in recession or inflation, uh, not very spontaneously. It takes time to predict the recession, whether the economy is experiencing a recession or inflation. So when the economy, like the example for which is that, like it takes at least 4 to 6 months or at least 2 quarters for GDP to fall, and then it is said that there's a standard definition that it is believed that for recession, the GDP of a country has to decrease consecutively for 2 quarters, which means 6 months, and then the recession is declared, right? And for inflation, the inflation is also like when the economy is in expansion, there are periods of smaller and moderate inflation, which will appear in future after certain period of time that yes, we are now affected by inflation. So recognition is one of the major timing problem in fiscal policy. Next to this, we have administrative lag. Like because the wheel of democratic governments is too slow. That once they have recognized that they are in recession or they are experiencing inflation, uh, implementing a policy or changing the policy is a difficult problem, because it is too slow when it comes to implementation of policy on the government level, right? So there's an administrative lag that is going to create a timing problem. Third is operational lag. Now we will assume that, okay, you recognize that we are hit by a recession or inflation, and you have also developed a policy which you have also implemented. Operational lag is, once the policy is implemented, it will take time to achieve its desired outcome. Let's say it is being debated among the economists that in recession it is highly likely that a tax cut will raise aggregate demand in a very shorter period of time or very quickly, and bring the economy back to its potential. Whereas increasing government spending in recession time will will be increasing aggregate demand with a slower pace. So it is recommended by economists that whenever the economy is in recession, tax is going to quickly affect the people's income, but increase in spending, which is used in terms of increasing mega project, like increasing spending on education, health, and other goods and services, national basket of goods and services, will take time to transform into will take time into ultimately bringing increase in the aggregate demand. So achieving the once the policy has been implemented, it will take time to achieve desired outcomes of fiscal policy. This is operational lag in the and it is one of the problems in fiscal policy. Political consideration, like now it is very common that fiscal policy which is under the control of government, when the fiscal policy is under the control of government, like politicians are going to decide, like politicians are going to use the fiscal policy to achieve their political motives, ignoring the economic outcomes and economic stability that is affected by the use of fiscal policy. This this is a very common problem that you will observe, like fiscal policy is being hijacked by politicians, and it is being used by politicians to in their self interest, rather than looking at its economic like implications. How? Whenever the election is near, the ruling party that is in government try to use expansionary fiscal policy to show people that they are providing welfare and necessary goods to you, and in order to get re-elected, rather without looking that economy was needing a expansion or it was needing a contraction. And when the economy, when they are elected again, they start again using contractionary fiscal policy, right? So as to run like so as to manage the expenditure without again looking at the whether it was required according to economic conditions to run a contractionary policy once they are re-elected. So it means there are more political business cycles which show that fiscal policy is politically motivated through like fiscal policy is implemented keeping in view the political motives rather than the economic conditions. So this is one of the serious problems that you will find in most of the uh, developing countries. Now, after that, we have future policy reversals, which means that sometimes fiscal policy fail, fails to achieve its objective. And how does it happen? When people assume that a tax cut that is offered to them is temporary. So a policymaker was intending that a tax cut will cause people to spend more, but people are behaving opposite to what policymaker expected. A tax cut has provided them increase in income, and they are not spending that extra income, rather they are saving because they believe that it is temporary tax cut, it will be taken back in future. So they are not increasing their consumption, rather they are increasing saving. So this is going to fail the fiscal policy, because it is not going to reduce the aggregate, it is not going to increase the aggregate demand. And in this way fiscal policy is going to fail. So it is very necessary to like see how people are going to respond to specific policy changes. Now if they would assume that a tax increase, that is like government is increasing taxes today, so if the government is increasing tax by 1 rupee, so they are, if they assume that it is temporary, they believe that it will be decreased to 1 rupee in future. So again, they are not going to change their consumption. They are using their savings to maintain their consumption. In this way, a tax cut that was designed to reduce the aggregate demand will not reduce it, and ultimately fails the fiscal policy. So this is very important. This is one of the area where fiscal policy is weaker in achieving its outcome. Last, and the like second last problem that is most common in various countries, like federal government is using expansionary fiscal policy and provincial governments are using contractionary fiscal policy. So there is there is no alignment of fiscal policies. There's no alignment, like the when the federal is trying to expand the aggregate demand, the provincial governments are using contractionary fiscal policies. So expansion is offset by contraction. So this would make situation or recessions more worse when the policies within the state are not aligned, like 4 5 provinces are not having the same kind of policy. It is not good for the economic health of the country. Now there's a last problem that you need to know, which is called crowding out. Which is called crowding out. Now, whenever the government is going to increase, whenever the government is deciding to increase its spending, and government is when the government is increasing its spending, it is going to increase the interest rate in the market. So when the government is increasing its spending, it leads to an increase in interest rate. So when interest rate increases, user cost increases, and private sector is going to cut down their spending. So in this way, increase in spending was designed to stimulate the aggregate demand and raise the output. But because of increase in government spending, there's an impact on the interest rate, which has disincentivized the investment, and investment has been declined, which is causing what? Which is causing uh, uh, decline in investment. So in this way, an increase in spending, which was motivated to increase aggregate demand, is offset by uh, a decrease in investment, which is because the interest rate has increased. So in this way, private sector, private individuals, private spending is going to decrease, because when government is using the like government is expanding its spending, government is willing to spend more. So the expansion from the government side in terms of its expenditure is causing interest rate to rise. So an increase in interest rate is causing a decrease in investment, and this cancels out the fiscal stimulus that was provided to raise the aggregate demand. Okay. So this is the impact of crowding out that you can see in front of you. On the vertical axis, we have real interest rate. On the horizontal axis, we have investment. Suppose that currently there's a 6% interest rate and the investment quantity is 25 billion. Now, because of increase in government purchases, uh, there's an increase in investment demand. So when the investment demand is increasing, there's an increase in interest rate. So because of an increase in interest rate, there's a drop in investment from 25 billion to 15 billion. So at 10%, investment is now lower than it was before. Like there's a drop in investment by 10 billion because of increase in interest rate from 6 to 4 billion. So government spending was intended to increase the aggregate demand, but because of increase in government spending, there's a drop in investment which has decreased the aggregate demand. So this is called crowding out. So this is all about fiscal policy. Okay. There are three groups. Sakshi, there are three tools of monetary policy. यार मैंने रिव्यू ओपन किए थे आपके मार्क्स एडजस्ट. Alright. So now we are going to talk about the monetary policy. So monetary policy and the Federal Reserve System. So Federal Reserve is a central bank of United States, and the job of Federal Reserve is to control money supply in the US economy. Monetary policy is the increase or decrease in money supply, and monetary policy is a government policy that is under the control of government institution known as central bank. Monetary policy is a central bank's like a policy that is based on changing money supply by the central bank to influence the interest rate in such a way to assist the economy in achieving price stability, full employment, and encourage economic growth. So these are the objectives of monetary policy. Like monetary policy is designed to change the money supply to so that interest rate is a tool to interest rate is a tool through which money supply is increased or decreased in the country. And the key objective behind changing the interest rate or money supply is to achieve price stability, full employment, and economic growth. So there are three objectives of central bank. So you can see price stability is a primary objective. So central bank control inflation through increasing or decreasing the interest rate. And central bank can also increase or decrease, achieve full employment by also changing the interest rate. And third is the economic growth. Economic growth can be promoted and hampered with again the interest rate. So it is the interest rate that is the main tool of monetary policy. So changes in interest rate are going to bring changes in the money supply. So there are like three tools of monetary policy: open market operations, reserve ratio, and discount ratio or discount rate. Open market operations, reserve ratio, or and discount rate. Now open market, you are familiar with open market operations. Open market purchase means central banks central bank is using financial instrument to increase or decrease money supply. When central bank is selling bonds to the public, so central bank is intending to reduce the supply of money in the country, because when central bank is willing to sell bonds to the public, bonds will be exchanged for money. Public will be getting bonds, and central bank will be getting money in return of bonds. So there would be a removal of money from the economy. So this would reduce the money supply. This is called open market sale. And when central bank is using doing open market purchase, so when open market purchase is there, so it means that central bank is willing to increase the money supply by buying bonds from the public. So public is getting money in return of bonds or any other financial instrument. So in this way, there is an increase in money supply using open market purchase. Open market purchase and open market sell are combinedly known as open market operations. And this is one of the tools with which central bank is going to control money supply in the country. Number two is reserve ratio. So we are familiar with open market operation. Now I'll talk about reserve ratio. Like before I described it, its definition, you can clearly see that if you see from the left side of this uh, of the screen, like you would find that depositors are depositing fixed amounts of money into commercial banks, and commercial banks are having fixed reserve requirement. Reserve requirement means this is the percentage of demand deposit that that is used by the commercial banks to clear checks. Let's say the first center in the first commercial bank, there's a 10% reserve ratio or reserve requirement. So 10% of the demand deposit is 100. So 100 will be kept by commercial bank to clear checks, and 900 is available to the commercial bank for lending out to the investors, right? So in this way, a next bank that is having let's say a next commercial, let's say if the same, if this, let's say in the next case, the reserve ratio is increasing from 10% to 20%. So the amount is same. So 20% of 1000 is 200. So now only 200 is available to the commercial banks for lending out to other investors. So with the increase in reserve ratio, there's a decrease in the amount of funds available to the commercial banks for lending out to investors. So there's a decrease in money supply. So whenever the reserve ratio increases, there's a decrease in money supply. And why it is happening? Because an increase in the reserve ratio is going to decrease the amounts of funds available to the commercial bank for lending out to investors. So in this way, with the increase in reserve ratio, there's a decrease in money supply in the country. Now, if you start from 30% and then move on to 10%, you would find that with the decrease in reserve ratio, there's an increase in the amount of money commercial banks can lend out to investors. So in this way, uh, reserve ratio and money supply are inversely proportional. With the smaller reserve ratio, there's a more money available to commercial banks for lending out to other investors, and in this way, with lower reserve ratio, commercial banks can inject more money into the economy and increase the money supply. Whereas if the reserve ratio increases from 10 to 30%, there is a drop in the amount of funds that commercial banks can lend out to investors, and there's a drop in money supply as well. So this is a second tool with which central banks are going to control the reserve, the money supply in the country. Now here, the central banks control the money supply using the commercial bank as a channel, because central bank is a bank that is above all the commercial banks. So reserve ratio is to be decided by the central bank in the country, and commercial banks have to follow it. So that is why you can see that with the increase in reserve ratio, there is a decline in the amount of money that commercial banks can lend out to investors. So there's a drop in money supply. And with the decrease in reserve ratio from 30% to 10%, there's an increase in the amount of money that that commercial bank can lend out to investors. It increases from 700 to 900, and money supply will increase. So this is a second tool. The third tool with which monetary authority, central bank can increase or decrease the money supply is the discount rate. Now, this is similar to the interest rate that we as a investor or consumer uh, pay to the bank when we borrow from a bank. Let's say I'm in need of 1 million and I'm borrowing 1 million from a bank. So bank is charging 10% per year. So 10% is the interest rate that is charged by bank for the loan against the loan that I have taken. Similarly, discount rate is a rate that is being charged by the central bank when commercial banks are borrowing from central bank. So it is the interest rate within the banks. Like here you can see, start from here. Here you can clearly see that central bank central bank controls the discount rate, and discount rate is interest rate that is charged by central bank on loans uh, on loans that are being taken by commercial bank. And when commercial banks are avail like when commercial banks have difficulty or like when commercial banks cannot borrow the larger amounts of money, uh, commercial banks cannot uh, inject that money into public as well. So what is happening here with the increase in discount rate, like here you can see, with the increase in discount rate, it means that as the discount rate goes up, there's an increase in cost of borrowing. There's an increase in price at which commercial bank can borrow from central bank. So commercial banks start cutting their borrowing. And when commercial banks are starting cutting their borrowing, they would be able to lend out smaller money to the public. So in this way, money supply is going to fall. And when the discount rate has been declined, so it causes commercial banks to borrow more money because the rate at which they can borrow from central bank has been reduced. So this would lead to uh, availability. This would lead to an increase in funds that are available at the disposal of commercial banks, and there is more money available to the commercial bank which they can lend out to other general public. In this way, money supply can be increased. So discount rate and money supply are also inversely proportional. An increase in discount rate means an increase in the price at which commercial bank can borrow money from central bank. So when discount rate increases, commercial banks are going to borrow less. They are going to uh, uh, like lend out money to public with a lesser quantity. So there's a reduction in money supply. And with a drop in discount rate, there's an increase in borrowing by commercial bank, which would increase the money supply in the country. Okay. Now this is a summary. Now this summary shows the idea that when open market purchase, when the central bank is using open market purchase, it would increase the money supply. And when central bank is using open market sell as a tool to change money supply, open market sell is going to reduce the money supply. Required reserve ratio or required reserves. When required reserves are falling, it means that commercial bank will be having more money that they can lend out to investors. So with the decrease in required reserve ratio, there's an increase in money supply. And when required reserve ratio increases, the funds available at the like funds that are available to the commercial bank for lending out to investors are going to going to decrease. So money supply is going to decrease. And discount rate is an interest rate charged by the central bank from commercial banks on the loan. So when discount rate is lower, commercial banks can borrow more amount of money and can lend out to public. So this would increase the money supply. And when discount rate is larger, there's a decrease in money supply. Now let's talk about a case of recession. Like currently we are experiencing a recession, global economy is experiencing a recession. So let's look at this diagram where aggregate demand and aggregate supply is represented. Now initially the equilibrium in the economy is at point at this point y bar, and the price level is this much. Now the economy of Pakistan is currently hit by a recession, and because of recession, aggregate demand has declined from y bar to y1. Supply has also declined from y bar to y1, and now the economy is here, where the dotted line is crossing or intersecting the aggregate demand too. Now, as a policymaker, as a governor state bank, you are asked to suggest the policy that would help reduce the unemployment and bring economy back to its potential. So, so an expansionary monetary policy will be recommended to increase the aggregate demand back to its potential. How would it be executed? On the left side, you can see that with the increase in money supply, like there was an equilibrium with money demand and money supply at point E. And at this 5%, the investment level was I1. So when money supply is being increased in the country, like currently the central bank has, like before the pandemic, there was interest rate in Pakistan, the central bank, the interest rate that was, or the discount rate, interest rate in the country, Pakistan economy was 13.25, but because of pandemic, the economy has fallen into a recession, and to bring economy back to its potential, State Bank of Pakistan reduced the interest rate from 13.25% to 7%. So which means they have increased the money supply, like you can see here. So with the decrease in interest rate, money supply, with the increase in money supply, interest rate has been decreased. So with the decrease in interest rate, there's an increase in investment. And you know that investment is one of the component of aggregate demand. So it would bring an upward shift in aggregate demand and bring economy back to its potential, and ultimately help policymaker in restoring the full employment output and reduce the unemployment. So this is a way with which, this is a way uh, through which expansionary fiscal policy can be useful to in recession, when the aggregate demand has decreased, cyclical unemployment has increased. Now you need to know, you need to recall that what was the cyclical unemployment. Cyclical unemployment was a gap between full employment level of employment and the current unemployment rate, right? So when output falls, there's an increase in unemployment as well. So this is a case of recession where expansionary monetary policy worked to bring the economy back to its potential y bar. Now this is a summary of what happened uh, with the usage of monetary policy. Because of recession, economy is operating below potential, which means lower than y bar. So we need expansionary monetary policy. Through expansionary monetary policy, what was like intended, with the increase in money supply, there's a drop in interest rate, and when the interest rate dropped, there's an increase in investment, and when investment increase, aggregate demand increase, which led to an increase in output. So economy after the economy after expansionary, with the usage of expansionary monetary policy, is brought back to its potential output. So do you case? We have case 2 here. Now suppose that economy is currently experiencing a boom. uh, Suppose that Pakistani, let's say, suppose there's an increase in, aggregate demand because of any reason. Maybe investment has increased because of CPEC, let's say, because of CPEC, CPEC, there's the, or let's say, let's reverse the example. Suppose that Modi's rating agency rated Pakistan in 2020, that Pakistan is performing better economically, and which raised the investors' expectation in Pakistan and caused investors in Pakistan to invest more. So this caused aggregate demand to shift from aggregate demand 1 to aggregate demand 2, and in this process, output has increased from potential. Output has increased beyond its potential. Y bar is a potential of Pakistan economy, and now Pakistan economy, like, this is the initial equilibrium, and now after the increase in aggregate demand, this much Y1 is the output level, and this is the price level, which is above the initial level of prices. Now, as a policymaker, you are asked, how should we control the inflation and bring the economy back to its potential? So you would say that uh, we can do it by raising the interest rate, and the way to raise the interest rate is to decrease the supply of money, or when money supply is to be decreased, it means the interest rate would increase. So you can see here a kind of contractionary monetary policy is required, because when aggregate demand will be contracted to its uh, original level, then output can be brought back to its potential level. So you are recommending contractionary monetary policy, which means to reduce the supply of money in the country. So you can see in the left, on the left side, that with the decrease in money supply, uh, from point E to F, the interest rate is increasing from 5% to 8%. When interest rate is increasing, there's a drop in investment from I1 to I2. And when investment is dropping, there's a shift backward in the aggregate demand from aggregate demand 2 to aggregate demand 3. In this way, economy is again back to its potential and operating at Y bar, and the inflation is under control. So what are the results? Case 2 is inflationary output. Now we know the inflationary, what does the inflationary output mean? So suppose investors expect profitability in future, so they increase their investment. Therefore, aggregate demand increase from AD1 to AD2. So this, hence economy is producing above the potential level, which has caused inflation. So as a policymaker, you are using contractionary monetary policy to bring back economy to its potential level. So it means interest rate has to be raised. So how it has to be raised? By decreasing the money supply, or with the increase in interest rate, money supply has to be decreased. So when interest rate has been increased, money supply is going to decrease. So when interest rate is going to increase, investment is going to fall, which is going to decrease aggregate demand, and output is going to decrease, right? So this is how a decrease in money supply raises the interest rate, and with the increase in interest rate, user cost increases, and with the user increase in user cost, businesses are going to borrow less and invest less. That is going to decrease the aggregate demand, and supply is also going to fall. So in this way, economy is brought back to its equilibrium. This is how contractionary monetary policy is used to control inflation in the economy.